So I guess the main question here is, when is it the right time to fire a coach in that position? You got a graphic for this, Ryan?
Yeah, let me give a couple examples for the people at home. We'll get to the Ravens specific example after this, but this is just the two that immediately came to my mind before I did the Ravens one. But James Franklin, 4 years before he got there, Penn State went 31-19 in 19, no bowl wins, and obviously all the other stuff that happened beforehand. But he did a really good job of leveling the ship and steering it in the right direction. But in his tenure, 104-45 record, a Big Ten championship, college football playoff semifinals, and 4 New Year's Six Bowl wins. Sean McDermott with the Bills, the NFL, didn't make the playoffs for 17 years, and during that time, the Bills went 118-154. During his time, he went 5 division titles, lost in the AFC title game twice, and he went 98-50. And obviously, we know a lot of those were to the hands of Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. For the Ravens' sake, Brian Billick, he was the coach before Harbaugh, 1 Super Bowl, 2 division titles, 4 playoff appearances. And if you wonder why there's no before that, because, well, the Ravens have really only hired like 4 coaches in their history. John Harbaugh, in his tenure, 1 Super Bowl, 6 divisions, 12 playoff appearances, record for most road playoff wins, 180-113. So the question becomes, when do you eventually fire a head coach? And honestly, if I'll give my personal opinion, I think it is after 5 years of not winning a championship and just kind of staying in the same rut. And kind of look at Mike Tomlin. He wasn't fired. He mutually parted ways. That's another one I didn't even think of putting up on the screen. But, no, those are the 4. And I would say 5 years of kind of just the same results and no sign of improving. I think that's the way you go.
Unless your name is Penn State, because I know what I'm about to say doesn't ring true for everybody. You don't quit a job until you have a job, right? Like, that's always been my adage to people. You don't quit a job until you have another job, right? Because the worst thing that you can possibly do is pop up and me going, hey, I quit. I want no part of this anymore. I'm stepping away. I don't want anything to do with this. And then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, okay, now I don't have an income stream. Now I don't have any options. Now I'm scrambling to try and find what the next option is for my football program. Again, unless your name is Penn State, because they fired James Franklin in the middle of the season. Now, they got away with it because they got a great coach to replace him, but there was a second there where that could have gone very, 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 very bad for Penn State. And so I think for a lot of these places, you get the feeling just from watching the trends and understanding, hey, we're not who we used to be. We might be still winning games, but we're not getting to that level to where we want to where the expectation is and where it's been built early in this coach's career. So you're looking, you're putting feelers out there, you're interviewing, you're getting in people's ears as to who could potentially be the heir to the throne, or heir to the throne, I should say. There's no H, the H is silent anyways, you get the point. But you don't quit a job until you have a job. And so I think for these organizations to think that they weren't already thinking about James Franklin's replacement for a couple of years is wrong. Now, obviously, they didn't leak anything, which credit to Penn State that there were no leaks on that. But it doesn't just happen on a whim.
I disagree with James Franklin's replacement because they struck out on like 10 different coaches before they eventually landed on Matt Campbell. I think
maybe they had an idea, but yeah.
I think maybe they were thinking of the replacement after the UCLA game. I think that would be. Let's be honest. Every athletic director, every single GM or owner, whatever you want to say it is, they always have a list in their back pocket if shit goes sour. Look at Sharon Moore, for crying out loud. All that stuff goes on. They always have a list, but I don't think they were ever actively looking for James Franklin's replacement unless he lost the national championship, which obviously they didn't even make the playoff and they were barely over a 500 team. But I'll say this. All these coaches that I've listed, obviously Sean McDermott hasn't gotten it yet, but they're all going to land on their feet because they're good football coaches. Look at Harbaugh.
Absolutely.
Harbaugh's got, I think, is it $20 million a year or $10 million a year? I don't know what his number is with the Giants, but the Giants are going to be in the conversation of making the playoffs at least next year. You think of Virginia Tech, which, by the way, I want to see Virginia Tech relevant for one thing. Just so once a year I can see Enter Sandman on primetime television once a year. That's all I want to see. I could care less if they
Off
get
to
blown
Never
out.
Never Land.
If I could care less if they get blown out in that game. I could care less if they lose every single game after they play that game. I just need to see Enter Sandman on primetime television in a night game once a year. That's all I need. It's not hard to ask. It's all I want. It's going to create another
Fair.
earthquake with them. But all I'll say
Woo.
is with McDermott, he's going to end up on a job somewhere. He's going to land on his feet somewhere doing something in terms of the NFL. But no, he's going to be he's a really good football coach. He's going to be back on his feet. But no, I think all these coaches are going to be really good in whatever spot. But the only thing is if you're one of these coaches or one of these teams, colleges, whatever it is, you have got to have a equal if not better replacement. I don't know if Matt Campbell is a better replacement than James Franklin. Maybe if you give him the resources, maybe we can have that discussion. But I think he did a really good job at Iowa State. The Ravens have a good history of hiring coaches. Is it going to be better than Harbaugh? I don't know. The Bills, you didn't make the playoffs for 17 years. At what point does that start becoming a question? Can Josh Allen ever get it done? At some point, because they had a damn good roster. Well, all I got to say is, if you're going to get rid of a coach, you better have an equal, if not better, replacement. And only time will tell for all these teams.
You
or
just
schools.
better have an idea as to who you're going to replace him with. I remember the same conversation about Jim at Michigan. You know, I mean, you get 7-8 years down the line,
Matt Campbell
people
was one
are
of the
like,
guys
okay,
I wanted in 2020.
well, yeah, it's like, okay, you want to fire Jim Harbaugh? Who's your other option?
That's what a lot of
Okay,
people
so Matt
said.
Campbell.
What
Yeah,
do you-
I could see that.
Like
That
if
would have been, but like, who?
Like, if the
What, you're
Lions-
just gonna fire a coach and then what?
Like if the Lions went out there and fired, let's say next year they don't make the playoffs. Obviously, hypotheticals here. If they go out there, don't make the playoffs, Dan Campbell gets canned. Who are you taking? Because I mean, he has to be arguably
Brian Dable.
Jeez, Ryan Day. Arguably he has to be arguably the best coach in Lions franchise history, right? Like, I can't think of another one.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if we're going all the way back to the 50s, but that's just a different time era, and that doesn't count to me
Right.
personally. But
Right.
I mean, he's obviously better than Caldwell, better than Schwartz, Patricia, all those guys. Like, he obviously is better. But you have to have a good replacement. And I personally think back to the point of when do you fire a head coach? I've said it's got to be a 5-year span of just the same results and no sign of it getting better. Because at that point, you're just kind of stuck in a rut. And maybe that coach ultimately is your best chance of winning. But at some point, you do have to make – I think McDermott was fired a little bit prematurely. I could see Harbaugh because it's been there for so long. I can see Tomlin's. James Franklin is a little questionable to me personally because I think he's going to do a really good job at Virginia Tech. But at some point, you have to make that jump and you have to make that choice of, well, this isn't working. We have to somehow find a way to get to that next step and over the hump. At some point, you have to find it. But I think 5 years of just this and no sign of improvement, that's the sign.
Yeah, exactly it. And at least that's a smart thing for organizations to do, to have a backup plan. Now, I'm not going to say all of them do. It's very realistic that there's just certain teams that just fire coaches simply because it's a spur of the moment decision. I mean, the reason why James Franklin was canned so suddenly this year was because that's probably one of the more underperforming college football teams that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, with the amount of talent that they had stacked on that roster, like, there were many talking heads at ESPN and the like who said the same thing, and that's Penn State is the most talented roster in the country this year, and they barely finished above 500. By the way, it's wild to think that Indiana's entire season hinged on that one catch at the end of the fourth quarter in the back of the end zone, the little toe touch catch. Freaking crazy. But that's the reality, you know. So it was, I feel like it was something that was building with James Franklin because we always knew him as Big Game James. But when it finally came down to it and that happened, that's when Penn State was like, all right, we got to move on. You know, and it's like a rip the Band-Aid type of situation off because there's no good way of doing it. Either you wait till the end of the year and you completely lose the locker room and then you completely lose everything else and then it all kind of falls apart, Or you rip the Band-Aid off in the middle of the season, you give the second man up an opportunity, and then the kids try to rally around him. And at least you keep some sort of continuity as opposed to losing the locker room. But then again, the players said that they were upset about it.